Welcome in to another episode of Betting the Pitches NFL Edition podcast. I'm your host, the real underscore G Warner. I'm joined as always by A underscore SCHNITKER. We are 10-4 in our last 14 best bets. Unfortunately, we took an 0-2 last week, and I don't think it came soon enough after one Andrew Schnicker decided to say we can't lose anymore.
Hey, you know what? I don't believe in curses. I don't believe in jinxes. So it's fine.
It's sad, I actually had
I don't want to lose. No, of course I don't want to
no
lose.
one does. I had an undefeated playoffs going until Sunday, and Todd Bowles loved that he went for two to try to get me a push, and for the Bucks lose by 6. That would have been really nice. I don't know. I have a lot to heard about the Bills.
Mm.
Just felt like one of those things going into a game where I had the favorite, which is not a normal thing for me, and I'm just like, I don't feel good at all having the
You start feeling
favorite
bad about
game.
it before
I'm
kickoff.
like,
Oh man.
they're only 2.5 at home to Kansas City. Yes, they've struggled in getting the monkey off their back. Oh my God, they can't beat Kansas City. And I mean, to me, it felt like Buffalo. I guess we'll go through this for a second, but we'll get into
Yeah.
the games shortly. We're gonna give you best bets as we always do. Try to keep that 10-4 record going and potentially change our momentum from last weekend. But just felt like even with almost all the calls option, like everything going Buffalo's way, still weren't able to make a field goal at the end. I don't know about you, but I felt like Kansas City was going to go down and score if they even if it was tied. So I didn't
Oh
feel
man.
great. I mean, it would have been nice
Everything.
to force them to do it.
Yeah. Everything about that last 5 minutes. I hated all of it. Yeah. I mean, we could go through it piece by piece and each play, talking about a matter, it's inches away from Stephon Diggs on that deep ball. But again, like I thought at the first part of that drive, they had the right strategy. Kansas City they were able to run on Kansas City. I don't know if that was, Kansas City's defense saying, okay, we're going to give you this. We're going to allow you to run. We're not going to let you beat us over the top all game. But, just working the clock, working the way down. And just like, if you look at time of possession and look at how many plays Buffalo ran,
Yep.
it was just crazy what they were doing. And um, it was all making sense. And you and I talked about it a little bit. I was like, okay, they've got the right strategy. They've learned from a couple years ago. Don't score too early. We're gonna march down and score a touchdown with 30 seconds on the clock, and that's it. They finally learned their lesson. And then Josh Allen lost his mind and decided, hey, I'm gonna go be the hero. It looked like the exact same play that he threw to was it Gabe Davis a couple years back, and that this time it didn't connect in the end zone. But they're at the 27, and it just felt like all of a sudden we're going to start panicking. We got to go for the end zone. You had Stephon Diggs underneath that was wide open. That would have been a first down. Then the third down play before the field goal attempt. Like, I don't know about you, but before when they lined up for the kick, I was like, I know how this is going to end. Like,
I
you
actually didn't think about it. Maybe it was the margaritas in my bloodstream, but
hope, yeah.
um,
After the sequence that just happened, I'm watching Josh Allen go for the end, throwing to the end zone when you have plenty of time to just get first downs and keep the clock going. I was like, man, this is karma. This is the way that it's supposed to be now because they got greedy and
uh,
just ditched a
just
strategy that worked.
Just another wide right. Tyler Bass, I think his first missed field goal
Yeah.
with less than 2 minutes in his career. It was 9 of 9 ahead of that. But at
That's right.
least, at least Sean McDermott's, at least his communication strategies was as efficient as possible, and they got the right play call in and told him to miss it wide right. So we're gonna get into the games, and we'll start with. We'll go in, I guess, the order of how they're kicking off, which
Yeah.
conveniently is how the rotation orders is given us. I'm quoting lines courtesy of betonline.ag. If you're not a member there yet, we have a link in the podcast description, whether you're watching on Apple Podcasts or on Spotify or on YouTube, that will give you a free 50% bonus for when you sign up at BetOnline. Also, another one for SportsBetting.ag, their sister site, good for 100%. So go throw in $500 at SportsBetting.ag. They'll give you 500 to play with. Rollovers and stuff do apply, but it's worth it. Take the free money. So go sign up if you haven't yet. So we'll start in Baltimore, Kansas City at Baltimore. We're going to give our numbers and then I'll tell you what the market opened and where we're at now.
I've got Baltimore -4.
I had Baltimore -4 with a total at 50, which is, I guess, pretty high.
Pretty
But
high.
maybe there's some weather stuff involved that I wasn't really considering. So it looks like we opened Baltimore 3-point favorite with a lot of juice, total at 45.5. Total has fallen to 44.5 since then. And the spread is now Baltimore -3.5. So let's start with this. I mean, we got a lot more time since we're only discussing two games in this podcast. We're used to doing a 6-pack and then also having best bets as well. We'll get those end of show. Don't you all worry. Um, does Baltimore deserve to be a 1 point bigger favorite than Buffalo does?
Yes. Yeah. I think like we're above the market. And I'm not surprised by that. I think both of us have been pretty high on Baltimore this year. If we wanted to take it a step further, I'm going to give Baltimore a full like 2.25 for home field advantage in this situation. Their crowd was awesome last week. It's the first AFC Championship game there in decades, right?
Well, Lamar Jackson certainly hasn't gotten them there.
That's true. That's right. That's right. I mean, they've won Super Bowls. I was trying to think back. I think it's like the 60s was the last time they like hosted this round of games.
Was funny to
Um,
me. I guess they did have some big underdog runs as like 6 seeds or whatever back because
yeah.
7 seeds didn't make it to the event way back when. But it was funny. They were talking about how John Harbaugh had come up with Lamar Jackson. And then I was like, wait, what about Flacco and Brian Billick and all this sort of stuff from the past? But I guess whoever was doing the game might have been Romo even. I'm not even sure. We're like, I don't know if anyone even read a book about the past of the Baltimore when they had like the best fantasy production like player of all time besides LaDainian Tomlinson, and it was the Baltimore defense in like
Yeah.
2000. But
2000.
okay, so Baltimore is better than Buffalo, and
Yeah.
their crowd. Would you give
So,
the Buffalo, I mean, snow throwing team a crowd, excuse me, that 2.25, or like how much different is Baltimore than Buffalo? And then we'll get to Kansas City.
okay. Well, so I would have Baltimore as a 2-point favorite on a neutral.
Okay.
Um, and I would have Kansas City. Yeah, I would have Kansas City at 1.5 because my line was Buffalo by 0.5. So basically pick.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. What's okay? Let me rephrase. So, after Kansas City's upset victory at Buffalo, did you become more impressed by Kansas City
Good
or
question.
by Baltimore, with their shaky first half? Which I mean, punt return touchdowns are hard to predict, and certainly things go wrong. And then they just absolutely pasted the Texans in the second half. But does that first half scare you enough that you feel like Kansas City outperformed your expectations last weekend with their win at Buffalo? Because I was pretty impressed.
Mhm.
Felt like they could have done better than they ended up. Probably shouldn't have been such a close game, but they just had to use Mecole Hardman by the goal line. Whereas Baltimore really, and you could certainly make the argument that Baltimore played a team that should not have been anywhere near the playoffs, never mind in the second round, second weekend, where Kansas City played a team that had been very hot, went to their home and took a win.
I think it makes me nervous to look at Kansas City because of the pedigree, because we know what those dudes are. We know the key players, and that's what when we look back to last week, who was it? It was Kelsey, it was Mahomes. Like in
Kelsey
these
for a
moments,
half, right?
yeah, you're going. Yes, true. You're going to your guys, and so those guys know what to do in these situations. That makes me nervous, but I think there's a lot of fluff in what they've accomplished for the offense at least. So we can look at it from the Chiefs offense right now. All right, so they play the Dolphins. It's negative 20 degrees, feels like temperatures. Tua
Yep.
was terrible. He can't play in cold weather. I don't know if we've talked, but it doesn't matter to me if these dudes are all from all over the country. They've grown up in cold weather. They now live in Miami. So they train in Miami, they practice in Miami, and then they travel. They are a shell of themselves on defense. I don't. What Kansas City did against Miami is not that was not peak Miami. And the offense still didn't look great. Last week, Buffalo missing key pieces in the linebacker, or at least players that were not 100%, guys that were definitely not at their best. And I think they took advantage of that as well. But it
Hmm.
still scares me to say, okay, no, I'm not. I'm going to stick to it. Like the Chiefs' offense is still not clicking the way that we expect. And those 2 or 3 games that we've looked at in the season are not going to change my mind on that.
Okay.
That's why I haven't made any sort of adjustment or done any changes to that because I think Baltimore is a clear cut side here.
Now you could argue that, I mean, it's definitely some value based on your number and mine, which I gotta say is rare that I'm usually giving more points with my number than what's actually out there in the marketplace. Now I thought KC looked pretty good against Miami in that playoff game, but they had the ground and pound mindset, and that worked. I think the conditions favored them significantly. Wish I had thought about that before I had picked the Dolphins against the spread. But then I feel like the Buffalo game, they didn't have the ball at all, but that's because Kansas City moved it so much, so quickly, so efficiently, and they didn't really have a ton of trouble scoring quickly, which if not for turnovers and bad luck or decisions, like to me, it should have been a much more lopsided result and never should have had a field goal to tie it in under 2 minutes. Now, what I do wonder though is that Buffalo's defense was so banged up and had so many injuries. Like even players that weren't injured got hurt in that game on Sunday and all that sort of stuff. Plus, we got Baltimore with an extra day of rest as well, and they don't travel at all because they're still at home in their own beds. So that all plays into the Baltimore side of things. I guess so. So you're still concerned about the Kansas City offense moving the ball against Baltimore, is what I'm reading between the lines.
Yeah, I think that they're going to struggle. I think that we've seen them. Miko Hardman, that was a crazy
Incredible,
situation. But
incredible.
I
I
mean, the
mean, that is
Chiefs,
Andy Reid. I mean, we've it's been the knock on him that he can't win big games because he does things like that.
if you just give it to Pacheco again 3 times, that's definitely a touchdown. Yeah, it's just too many field goals. You could probably go into like an advanced box score and look at, the breakdown yards per play and those kinds of things, and it'd probably be about even and say, okay, this Chiefs offense is significantly improved. I just still have questions about Baltimore's defense. I mean, I guess we're not really like breaking new ground here as like they're the clear cut #1 defense in the league. Um, yeah, they're gonna get pressure with 4 guys. They're gonna I'm excited to see that defensive line is really great at they take stopping the run as like their clear-cut challenge. They'll get pass rush for sure. But Clowney, I mean, for all that he was in college, he sets the edge so great, so well. Um, and they're going to stop the run. So watching them against Pacheco, just because of the style that he is going to be cinema for sure. Um, and so, yeah, I think they're definitely going to struggle. If you eliminate Rashee Rice, we need to look at an injury report. Maybe I'll check that in just a second. But yes, they've identified him as their other guy. But I think Baltimore's defense can eliminate one of Kelsey and one of Rashee Rice, and then where are you going to go?
I
Who are
mean,
you
I
going
would eliminate Rashi Rice forever. Kelsey getting 10 yards per catch and eight of those, or two of those, 20% of those being yards after catch because he just falls forward and he's 6'6" or whatever.
to?
That doesn't concern me. Definitely, if you can stop the running game. I mean, it probably depends on whether I bet on or against Marquez Valdez-Scantling, whether he catches the ball or not. But I felt like he suddenly made some big plays last
He
weekend
did.
because I
He
was on the
did.
opposite
He did.
side. But
Yeah.
so maybe that was a big step in the right direction. What do we think about Lamar moving the ball against the Kansas City defense, which probably is a little bit overvalued based on what it did to Miami and then what looks like a much better, I think, box score than just because the yardage totals weren't there. Yards per play were pretty low against Buffalo, and it was on the road. But the time of possession to me, that's as much of a concern as the yards you allow when a 37-minute to 23-minute essentially split that just tells you your defense wasn't able to get stops, get off the field. Maybe it's great that they got him in third down situations, but to me, that's only half the battle
Steve Spagnuolo is probably my favorite defensive coordinator in the NFL.
because he's going to blitz.
Just over, well, not Wink Martindale style blitzing, but yeah, he's going to blitz. But I mean, if you look back to his career
Yeah,
with
yeah, sure. With the
Giants and all,
Giants. Yeah.
um, he's like his game plans in these big moments are always usually, or they're usually pretty special.
Well, was that because of Jason Tuck and or
Yeah, no,
Justin Tuck, excuse me, and Michael Strahan, where
Michael
he didn't
Strahan
have to
certainly
blitz?
helps, and Osio Manura was a
Yeah,
young
not so
one at
bad
that time.
too. Right, right.
It definitely helps to have those guys. This Chiefs defense, we've talked about it. It's much better. It's top 6 or 7 in the league this year. But it's still built in a way of, okay, we're going to let the Chiefs offense put the pressure on, get up by a score or two, and then we're just going to let these pass rushers run loose. Charles Omenihu, we've brought up several times. I really liked what
He
he's
went to a great school.
he did go to a great school, and he's from my hometown, Rowlett. So I've got multiple support for
Wow.
Charles
Wow.
Omenihu.
Didn't know I was doing this podcast with Michael Guillen for so long. Who knew?
um, what's up, Kian? I hope he watches.
0% negative. Actually negative. If there's anything other than weightlifting, I don't think it's on that guy's iPod.
Okay, we got derailed. So yeah, I think that the Chiefs defense,
So they're bend but don't break.
Baltimore is certainly fine. Hey, let's look back. We can go back to the Texans game. Think about those drives that they had in the second half. Those were sustained. There was like 2 super long drives, multiple plays, a bunch of time, and they're more than happy to control that and work their way down the field, and they've proven they can do it. So I don't think saying that the Chiefs are saying, okay, we're going to let you slowly move down and wait till you make a mistake. I don't know if that's, no, I don't know that. I don't think that's going to work.
I mean, Lamar doesn't seem like the mistake prone guy he was earlier in his career. And he also is probably Russell Wilson from years and years ago in terms of escapability.
Yeah.
I don't know. I mean, at this point in the season, they're certainly going to use him and as much as they can. I think every quarterback run is on the table if that's going to be a value in this game. Of course, one more game until they get to the Super Bowl. So I think all cards are on the table. I like that. You got the best kicker in the history of the world for Baltimore. Also went to a great school, if I didn't say so already. And I wonder where you think this line is moving before we transition to the next game. We got 3.5 right now, a total of 44.5. Weather looks like 40 degrees, little precipitation in the forecast, but obviously that can change up until Sunday at 4 p.m. Eastern time.
I mean, I don't know how many, it's Tuesday night when we're recording this. I've just done a quick sampling and try to, there are lots of really great podcasts out there. Listen to those, get people's takes on their numbers, and everyone consensus wise is just like, oh yeah, these are the right numbers. This is the market. So, are we going to see movement? Well, I mean, I hope we see movement in the way of the Chiefs, because then at least I'm going to have a play. But, I mean, could we get to 4? That would say a lot to me at this point. When you're talking about 2 games left, I truly think that people setting these lines are just like, okay, have at it. Let's see. I'm not going to move it much because we're going to get just so much volume on both sides. I don't see it moving. I don't see it moving much. If it did go anywhere, I would say it would go up. It would go to
To
4.
-4. I mean,
Yeah.
I think it's a great position for sportsbooks everywhere to make the Taylor Swift side as cheap as possible. You got no chance of a push here at 3.5. That's I think ideal for books as well. Same with the total of 44.5. But you could argue that it might be better for the NFL to have Taylor Swift and Jason Kelsey in the same box at the Las Vegas Roomba. If I had to, if there's anyone trying to make a case for the business of the largest sports organization in the United States of America, maybe the world, but probably not. We'll now move to the NFC and we'll switch coasts to San Francisco. What do you have for Detroit at San Francisco?
Like 7.25. We'll go 7.5 just to have some difference.
Yeah, I made it 6.5. Looks like we opened 7. We're still there. Opened with a very juiced 7, it looks like, from whatever line monitor I'm currently using.
Mhm.
Total open 51. We're still there, but looks like juice has come down a little bit on the Detroit side, but still, you're paying probably 114 at Bet Online. Thank you for sponsoring the podcast, by the way. And if you are looking at San Francisco, you're laying -7, but you're only paying 6 cents on the dollar for it. So, do we think that Detroit and their win over Tampa slash their close win over the Rams as well? I guess we'll start there, but there's probably more to say about San Francisco. So, what do we think about Detroit and their ability to win 2 games at home that, to me, were pretty close for a long time?
Yeah, and box scores say that as well. I don't. I they they've as they've become the darling of the tournament that's left. Everyone's fired up to see what they can do. Um, but neither of the games that they played have they dominated in the box score. Um, I for as much as I really appreciate Dan Campbell, I think it's pretty awesome to watch him in this spot, and he always says the right things, and it's cool to see. And just like I'm nervous about Jared Goff in this situation.
Oh, I thought
Uh,
you were about to call Dan Campbell everyone's favorite coach ever a liability.
no, I'm their liabilities on the defensive side with that coaching staff,
Oh
with
yeah,
that
Aaron Glenn.
with those decision makers. The thing like we talked about a little bit that just is kind of still weirding me out, and I know it doesn't make that much of a difference, but like the kneel downs at the end of the game and the clock situation and just like the unawareness of that.
Apparently, it was a gentleman's agreement because they had played together and that they basically said we weren't going to call our timeouts. I don't know how that's communicated. That seems absolutely banana
What
land
do you
insane to
mean?
me.
What do you mean it's a gentleman? Like,
Like there was, I apparently they didn't. It was like planned to not use all the time just to get off the field as quickly as possible, to celebrate. Blah blah blah. You've beaten us. I
but they like if it were a two-score game at that point, yeah, okay. I get it. You got one timeout, a minute 32 on the clock. And yes, if the Lions would have just done the math correctly, then there wouldn't have been any time. But when he snaps it on second down with 20 seconds on the play clock, you're now at a little bit over a minute. And then he snapped it again with 20 seconds on the play clock. That whole agreement, everything changes. Whatever you're thinking math wise, they screwed up. That doesn't matter. Like, what are we doing? It just like it feels like a piece, like
hey
an attention to
hey.
detail
When
type.
Todd Bowles says the game is over, it is over. When he basically went back to Napoleon times and he waved his white
Yeah,
flag
except to feel
and
like, what are we
decided
talking about?
it was time
What do
for
you
him to go
mean?
home.
Like you're forcing them to either kick a field goal or go for it, and if they don't get it, then you're gonna have the ball at like the 35-yard line and 28 seconds to go.
Yeah, I mean
You could at
he
least set yourself up for a scary, 40-yard, 30-yard throw to the end zone.
I'm gonna get one of those little like hooks that they have from off stage and pull you back onto topic because we got a Lions 49ers
This,
game to discuss now. So let's
hey,
just move. Let's get you off of that. Let's go to the San Francisco 49ers. One of the most miraculous comebacks is a 10.5 point favorite that they closed. Honestly, I'm shocked that Green Bay is not playing in this game, but it did so happen that on the last weekend in the NFL, I had bet 3 games and a kicker missed a field goal in all 3 games. And I do feel like it was pretty important in all of them. But with that said, that certainly against the spread it was. What do we think about San Francisco and that little quarterback problem they seem to have?
a lot of people have been talking about the weather and
Yeah.
how his worst games were in the weather.
Okay.
Um, I feel like in this podcast, I'm the Brock Purdy apologist of us two.
I
Um,
mean, that by
I
default,
don't
you would be. I think he
he
sucks. I used to like him. I don't anymore. We got 70 degrees in Santa Clara on Sunday,
yeah,
with precipitation of 0%. So that's a pretty good sign for a beautiful day for
okay.
Brock. Maybe he wears a glove, maybe he doesn't.
I hope not. Okay, let's just break down the 49ers offense. Debo Samuel not playing or at 25%. That is a downgrade just because of what he is able to do in that offense. Um, I wouldn't be surprised if they use somebody else somewhat in that role.
which is
It
not
will,
Brandon Ayuk.
it will not be as effective. It will not be Brandon Ayuk.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but it's just too much of a piece of their offense. I think that they're going to have success here. Uh, Tampa was able to have success, and they had a good game plan. It was they they played well on offense. The secondary is going to give Purdy some opportunities. This feels like a situation where everyone has criticized and doubted, and they went up against a hot team with Green Bay,
They did.
and everything just
They,
fell.
they were also getting blown out by said hot team, and then it
Yeah,
miraculously changed.
and the red zones differences between Green. It's pretty remarkable to look at how all that unfolded and how they escaped. But this team is still the best offense in the league, and the Lions aren't going to be the team that's going to create the problems for Brock Purdy.
So I'm a 100,000% believer that Shanahan is able to create an offense where he can run the ball with success. I don't think it matters who the running back is, whether it was Deebo Samuel or Christian McCaffrey or Mitchell or whoever comes out of that San Francisco backfield. So I'm a believer in that. Do we think that the Lions are able to limit that success, though, to a point where there will be third and long scenarios, or are you just telling me that the line of scrimmage is already won by San Francisco? Because that would make it very hard for Detroit to hang around and only lose by a touchdown or less to cover the spread.
That is tough because San Francisco's offensive line, aside from the left tackle, is not very good. That left
But
tackle
that's
is
a scheme thing. It's
valuable.
always felt to me.
It is. You're right. Like you could Raheem Mostert, and obviously he's a very talented running back. But it didn't matter who the running back was in fantasy football. You always wanted to get the 49ers running backs,
Yep.
and that hasn't changed. I think McCaffrey is just so multifaceted in the way that you can use him in the passing game. They're not really an efficient run game, but they just break off these massive runs, these explosives that really change the game. And so I don't know down to down. I don't think down to down they're going to have success against the Lions run defense, but I do think that they'll be able to gash and explosives. There's a reason people count the explosives because that's going to be indicative usually.
Okay. Well, if they're not able to control the line of scrimmage in that way and have a dominant performance, then that puts it on Brock Purdy to find a potentially banged up Deebo Samuel. We're recording this Tuesday night, so we don't know that he's out yet. But then going down that list, it's George Kittle, who does show up from time to time, but I feel like he's either one of those volume type receivers or one that looks really good when you're very concerned about Brandon Ayuk and Deebo Samuel. Juwan Jennings doesn't seem to be that dominant to me. Chris Conley, I looked, he's been in the league 10 years now. I was shocked he was even on a roster at this point.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
No, Chris Conley's a Georgia Bulldog. Good
He
dude.
is. Yeah. Hoo, 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 hoo. Sick 'em dogs or whatever. Nice job in the playoff this year, UGA. I gotta say though, everything we get to then I think falls at the feet of Jared Goff. I mean, yes, this is outdoors, but maybe that great weather that impacts both quarterbacks here in the correct direction.
Yeah.
I probably would rather have it be worse for the underdog's sake, but I feel like from a Lions perspective, they've been able to run the ball and really to Montgomery's their power back, and then the change of pace that they've gotten from the other running backs that they're somehow
Jahmyr
capable
Gibbs.
to use. Jahmyr Gibbs has been awesome and looks like one of those guys. If he gets any space, he is not catchable. And that makes me very interested in backing a Detroit team that are getting a full touchdown, especially considering San Francisco looked so poor as a 10.5 point favorite to the Packers. I feel like this is almost a reaction to that price based on how dominant Green Bay was for most of that game that I don't think you could. I'm not sure I would rate Detroit and Green Bay that much differently on a neutral field at this point. Yes, you could argue that the the drama of the conference championships matters and probably helps San Francisco more because they're used to this far more than Detroit is. But I don't think there's like a concern for me that this is their first conference championship since we've been alive.
No.
I don't know if that makes me any more concerned. I think my biggest concern is, can Detroit stop Christian McCaffrey running the football? And if they can keep it to a reasonable amount of yards per carry and things of that nature, and try to put some of this responsibility on their quarterback, then I think Brock Purdy is in a position to put San Francisco in a bad position and make this a close game at the end, which makes that 7 points more valuable. Before we get to best bets, where do you think that this spread will move? And total for that reason. I think with the weather, we got to expect that we might see some over money coming in.
Yeah, I would agree with that. I think the total might tick up. I think if this gets to 6.5, it's gonna quickly go back up to 7. Feels like everybody is watching their odds screens to see, okay, can I find a 6.5 somewhere? Again, like I think, hey, we're gonna put it right at a touchdown, and
Good
and get
luck. See what you want to do with
we're
it.
gonna get the public coming in hard on the Lions. I think
On
I
the
would,
Lions, I
yeah.
think they're like, oh my gosh, I can win. I win by a touchdown, and at worst, I push. Come on. I don't think the
I
public's ever saying, oh, there are games that they only win by six.
Well, maybe, I mean, maybe not, but like, I just don't know if anyone, the whole getting wrapped up in this whole story of what the Lions are and like it
Oh,
feels like
oh.
everything that I see
Narrative Nation.
narrative nation is all Lions. So that's usually right. That's usually the way I would look at it of how people say, wow, look at this team that came from nowhere. They
I
have a great
mean,
coach.
yeah, they were born in 8 Mile. They had threw up mom spaghetti on their sweater already. I guess that's how it goes. But
Something like that.
uh, I,
I
I
do.
go ahead.
Would you rather in this situation? Would you rather have, if you're coaching this team, would you rather have Jared Goff or Brock Purdy as your starting quarterback?
God, pass.
Yeah, you have to pick one.
Uh, I'll take the one that's getting 7 points.
Okay. I saw the stat that they had played 10 of their last 12 games in a dome. I do think that's interesting.
Yeah, it helps
They
when
went,
two of their division opponents are in the dome or themselves in Minnesota.
I mean, it's not a stat. You were like, oh, that cements it. That's the foundational piece to my handicap. It isn't.
But here we go though, because we're saying, oh, bad weather, let's bet against Brock Purdy. Oh, bad weather, let's bet against Jared Goff. Oh, bam, they hit each other in the heads, and one's giving 7 points. So let's go. I guess before we get to best bets, let's go game by game as we have already. We have Baltimore, a 3.5 point favorite at home to the Chiefs.
Okay. We'll take the Ravens.
I'll go Chiefs. Detroit, a 7 point underdog at San Francisco.
All chalk. I'll take the 49ers.
Okay, you had to say it for the stenographer. I'm going to go with the Detroit Lions +7. So it's now time for the best bets portion of the show. Andrew Sticker is 6-1 his last seven. I was 4-1. Now I'm 4-2 last six. Our podcast has been really doing a great job towards the end of the season, and we're looking to get back on the right side of things, considering I felt we were pretty close last. Maybe I don't know. Maybe that late touchdown return. I was like, oh my god, here comes 7-0, and it's gonna absolutely ruin my Saturday evening. But I guess I'm somewhat glad. Sorry for your best bet streak, but
I
I'm
didn't
glad.
deserve it.
I think it would have been one of the worst beats of my being if that had occurred. But if you're not a member of my Patreon yet, check it out. Patreon.com/real_G Warner. Best spot to get all my plays across all the sports, including the NFL. But it's time for best bets. So A_SCHNITKER on Twitter. Go ahead. What do you have?
We're gonna go back to it. We're gonna go back for a second week. We're gonna chase that loss. Let's take the 49ers -7. If you're getting it right now, you're gonna get you can get it at $1.05,
Yeah.
$1.06.
Yeah,
You
sure.
don't have to
Yeah.
pay much juice on that. And this is also a play when we did this last Tuesday. It was 9.5. You are trying to gauge the market, trying to figure out where this thing is going to go. I think if we're going to go anywhere, there might be a 6.5 out there, and I would recommend scooping that up. But since we're doing that on a Tuesday, let's say the number 7. And I think it has a better chance to close above 7 than it does below.
So you just heard it. This is Betting the Pitch NFL edition with your host, real_G Warner. You just heard Andrew Schnicker. If you're listening to our full Brulone edition, 40 minutes or so on the conference championships weekend, he just gave you the San Francisco 49ers a 7-point favorite. He's 6-1 his last 7 best bets. So I believe that's like an 86% winning percentage. Pretty good. I've been 4-2 my last 6. Our podcast together, I think we're 10-4 last 14. Pretty good. And for my best bet on this NFL podcast, I'm going to go with the fighting Taylor Swifts, a 3.5-point underdog on the road at Baltimore currently. I think we might get a little bit more by game time, but give me 3.5 with Patrick Mahomes. I don't know what or who he's going to throw to. I don't really feel great about Kansas City in general, but I just feel like getting more than a field goal. Excuse me, more than a touchdown would be great. More than a field goal on Andy Reid and his love for Mecole Hartman is just too big for me. And that'll do it for this episode. We got one more left before the Super Bowl, and we'll figure out when we're doing that one. I don't think there's any reason to do a NFL All-Star Game, Pro Bowl type of scenario with
You
guessing
can do that one if you'd like.
who's going to win the hopscotch competition. I don't know who actually. ESPN paying for that. That is the hoodwink of the century. But do you have anything to give the people or anything you'd like to say before we sign off?
No,
One
we
more
just
episode left to go.
you have to celebrate these games that are left. Just enjoy each piece of it. Um, the numbers are tight. Think about how many games are left, so you don't have to have a play on everything. Just enjoy it. We got 3 games left. This is an exciting weekend.
Enjoy it. Make sure you go leave a 5-star review in Apple Podcasts or Spotify. Subscribe on YouTube. Leave us a 5-star. It'd be really nice as a thank you for a great season. And maybe I'll convince A_Schnicker to do a little post-season futures episode or something like that when we get there. Thanks for tuning in. We'll talk to you all very soon. Have a great evening, day. Whenever you're listening to this, say what's up to your kids and family because they do exist.